Among thousands of people, a small boy suddenly stood up and asked a question. Just a simple question, but the moment it echoed through the hall, the atmosphere completely changed. Trump, a man known for his sharp responses, fell silent. His eyes wavered. Millions watching live wondered, why wasn't he answering right away? No one knew that this question had stirred up a deep pain that even Trump himself had tried to forget. And what he said next left the entire hall in tears. Thousands of people erupted in applause, welcoming Donald Trump, arguably the most controversial figure in American politics, yet also the most captivating one. He strode onto the stage, his signature confident smile playing on his lips. His supporters leapt to their feet, waving flags, while media reporters tracked his every move with unwavering attention. The speech unfolded exactly as expected. Powerful, sharp, and bursting with energy. He spoke about the economy, America's achievements, and the challenges ahead. Then came the Q&A session, a segment where Trump always excelled. A middle-aged man stood up, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Trump, what are your thoughts on the current geopolitical situation?" Trump smiled lightly, shaking his head with confidence. "Let me tell you one thing. When I was president, others wouldn't dare to cause such chaos." The hall erupted in laughter and applause. Then a young woman raised her hand, asking about tax policy. Trump continued to answer with his trademark sharpness, driving the crowd into an even greater frenzy. Everything was going perfectly, like a well-orchestrated show. But then, a small voice rang out, shattering the atmosphere. A boy no older than 12 stood up among the packed rows of seats. He wore no fancy suit, had none of the appearances of a politician or businessman, just a small boy with bright eyes and a question that weighed like 1,000 pounds. His voice rang out clear and pure. "Mr. Trump, have you ever lost someone you wish you could go back in time to make things right with?" The hall fell dead silent. Not a word was spoken. The TV cameras instantly zoomed in on Trump. He stood there, more silent than ever before. 5 seconds passed. Trump didn't respond immediately, which was rare for him. 10 seconds. Trump's aides in the front row began to fidget. TV cameras were pointed directly at him, while millions watched live. But Trump still remained silent. The man who had faced off against the most powerful politicians, the sharpest journalists, the most grueling hearings, was now rendered speechless by a little boy. Some people began to think he didn't know how to respond. Then he took a deep breath, his eyes gazing into the distance, no longer focused on the audience. It seemed as if he was no longer on the stage, but had returned to a memory far away, filled with pain. Trump looked down, his hands unconsciously gripping the podium. He blinked rapidly, but everyone could see how the look in his eyes had transformed. Gone was the politician's gaze, gone was his usual sharp edge. This was the look of a man facing something he had tried to forget for years. He took another deep breath. "Let me tell you about my brother." Trump took a deep breath. The memories came flooding back like a slow-motion film. "I once had a brother, someone I always looked up to when I was young. Fred, he was different from me. He was gentle, kind, always smiling. I was the opposite. I always wanted to win, always needed to prove my strength." Summer 1958, New York. 2 boys, one about 12 years old, thin but agile, and another a few years older, tall, with a gentle smile, were climbing onto the roof of the Trump mansion. "Hurry up, Don," Fred called out as his little brother struggled with the protruding bricks. "I'm not scared," young Donald Trump, stubborn and refusing to be outdone. After they both made it up, they lay down, gazing at the New York night sky stretching above them. The distant skyscrapers sparkled with lights. Fred put his hands behind his head, letting out a long breath. "I always wonder, Don, if God is watching us from up there." Unconcerned. "God might see us, but what does it matter?" Fred chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You're always so tough, Don. One day you'll understand there are things you can't control, things beyond our power." He never believed in fate or destiny. "No, Fred. Everything can be controlled. If you're strong, you win. If you're weak, you get crushed." He just gazed at the sky, his eyes holding something deep that Donald couldn't yet understand. Time passed by. Fred remained an optimistic, cheerful person. He disliked competition and had no interest in business. Donald was the opposite. He was strong, decisive, and didn't believe in weakness. He always thought Fred was too soft. When their father, Fred Trump Sr., offered Fred the opportunity to take over the business, Fred refused. "Father, I don't want this. I don't want to live a life revolving around money and power. I want to choose my own path." Donald was bewildered. How could anyone reject such a golden opportunity? After that day, the brothers began to drift apart. One late afternoon, Trump and Fred sat on a long bench in the yard. They were both grown up, but the distance between them had never been greater. "Do you really not want to inherit the company?" Donald asked, his voice no longer calm. Fred shook his head, looking at his brother with sad eyes. "Not everyone wants to be a real estate tycoon, Don." Donald snorted, leaning back. "Then what do you want to do? Float in the sky like some dreamer?" "I just want a peaceful life, want to do what I love. And Don, not everyone wants to be a king." "You'll regret this, Fred," Trump said, his voice full of certainty. "One day, you'll realize you've lost a huge opportunity." Didn't argue, he just looked at his brother and said something Donald would never forget. "Don, someday you'll realize there are things money can't buy." He didn't believe it. Fred lived his own peaceful life, while Donald became one of America's most powerful businessmen. Fred had no ambitions, only wanting a quiet life. Donald built an empire, believing that power and money could buy everything. They still met during holidays, but never spoke again about that fateful argument. One winter day, amid New York's towering skyscrapers, Trump was in the middle of a crucial meeting, the spacious room with glass walls overlooking Manhattan's skyline. Before him sat senior advisors, major investors, and a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Trump, as usual, was confident and powerful. He was in complete control of the negotiations, each word sharp and precise. Ring. The phone in his pocket vibrated. An unknown number. He ignored it. Ring, ring, ring. The phone vibrated again. A message appeared on the screen. "Don, Fred is gone." The world around him froze. Trump sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the text on the screen. Advisor's voice echoed from across. "Mr. Trump, we need to decide on the contract terms." But he couldn't hear anything anymore. His hand gripped the phone tightly. His heart pounded until it ached. Trump rushed out of the meeting room without saying a word. The advisor called after him. "Mr. Trump, where are you going?" But he didn't care. Outside, the cold was bone-chilling. The New York wind howled, but it wasn't as cold as the feeling gripping his chest. He walked fast, then ran. To Mount Sinai Hospital immediately. The driver just nodded and stepped on the gas. No questions asked. Every minute in the car felt like a century. Memories began rewinding in his mind like an old film. Two brothers on the rooftop, Fred smiling, talking about God. Their biggest argument. All the times Trump missed Fred's calls because of work. The hospital doors burst open. Trump rushed in, his expensive shoes echoing across the marble floor. But when he saw his mother standing there, her face solemn, eyes red with tears, he knew. It was too late. Fred was gone. Trump froze in place. The room spun around him. No one spoke. Slowly, he walked into the hospital room. Fred lay there, more silent than ever. Trump sat down beside the hospital bed, his eyes wavering for the first time in years. Everyone left him alone. His hand gently touched Fred's ice-cold hand. His breath caught. His chest felt crushed. He looked at Fred, who had always spoken about faith, about love, about things Trump had never believed in. But now, Fred was gone. And Trump could do nothing to change that. For the first time in his life, he whispered a question he never thought he would ask. "Where is God?" No one answered. No miracles, no wonders. Just Trump and the silence. Trump still sat silently by Fred's hospital bed, his eyes no longer as sharp as usual. No battles to win, no deals to negotiate. Only loss and regret gripping him tight. Outside, snow began to fall, tiny snowflakes clinging to the hospital window. New York's winter had never felt so cold. 3 days later, Trump stood before Fred's apartment. A small, simple apartment, a world away from the towering skyscrapers Trump owned. As he entered, Fred's warmth seemed to linger somewhere. Books still neatly arranged on the shelf. Fred's coat still hanging on the rack. A childhood photo of the two brothers sitting on the desk. Trump slowly walked over, picked up the photo. Fred's gentle smile in the picture. And Donald, still that ambitious look in his eyes, even as a child. When Trump opened the desk drawer, an old envelope appeared. On it was familiar handwriting, Fred's handwriting. To Don, if one day you read this letter. Trump froze. He slowly opened the envelope, taking out a yellowed piece of paper. Fred's words appeared clearly, as if he was still talking to him. Don, if you're reading these lines, I'm probably gone. But I want you to know that I was never angry with you. I know you always saw me as a dreamer. You thought I was weak because I didn't like to fight. But Don, I never needed victories to feel worthy. I just wanted a peaceful life, a meaningful one. I've always believed there are things you can never buy, and I hope someday you'll understand that. Don, you've built an empire. You've accomplished things few could do. But let me ask you this. If tomorrow you lost everything, what would remain? Trump gripped the letter tightly in his hands. For the first time in many years, his hands trembled. No more sharp rebuttals, no more powerful arguments, only silence and tears welling up in his eyes. Trump sat in Fred's chair, still clutching the letter. In his mind, a question echoed, more powerful than anything else. Was Fred right? Fred was right. There are things money can't buy back. Some things, no matter how much money or power you have, can never be changed. Trump took a deep breath, looking up at the ceiling where Fred used to talk about God when they were young. For the first time in many years, he put his hand on his forehead, closed his eyes, and whispered, God, if you're listening, please give me a sign. And then, something strange happened. From the window, a faint ray of sunlight pierced through the thick snow outside. The light fell directly onto the photograph of the two brothers on the desk. Trump opened his eyes. There was no grand miracle, no thunder or mystical omens, but something inside him had changed, a warmth and understanding. He picked up the letter again, reading Fred's final words. Remember, Don, you're never truly alone. Trump stood up. He didn't know how he would change, but he knew that he was no longer the man he was yesterday. And tomorrow, when he returns to the stage, he would have an answer for the boy who asked that question. 3 days later, the lights blazed on the stage of the speech. Trump stood there, but he was no longer the man from 3 days ago. No one in the hall knew what he had gone through, but something had changed in his eyes. For the first time in his life, Donald Trump didn't feel the need to be strong. Suddenly, among thousands of spectators, a tiny hand shot up again. It was the same boy from before. He stood there, eyes still bright with curiosity, with the same question. Mr. Trump, have you ever lost someone that you wish you could go back in time to make things right? The hall fell silent. No more whispers, no more glances. Everyone waited for his answer. Trump smiled softly. He took a deep breath, but this time not to hide his emotions, but to embrace them fully. You know what? Trump said, his voice deepening, but no longer wavering. I did lose someone I wish I could go back in time to make things right with. The boy blinked, listening intently. The entire hall leaned forward, not wanting to miss a single word. I had a brother, a man who was much better than me, someone who always put others first, who thought about the meaning of life more than money or success. But I didn't understand that. I thought power was everything. I thought if I was strong enough, smart enough, I could control everything. Trump paused, his eyes gazing into the distance. But there are things you can't control, child. Things that, once lost, you can never buy back, no matter how much money or power you have. His words echoed through the hall. Some people bowed their heads as if reflecting on something in their lives. My brother told me something long before he left this world. Don, someday you'll realize there are things money can't buy back. Trump smiled softly, but his eyes welled with tears. He was right. A woman wiped away her tears. A middle-aged man squeezed his wife's hand. Someone took a deep breath to hold back their emotions. At this moment, there was no politics, no debates, just humans looking at each other and thinking about those they had lost. Trump looked around the hall, no longer the man who only sought victory. He suddenly spoke. How many of you have lost someone before you could say thank you? No one spoke, but a sea of hands rose up. People looked at each other, silent, yet all feeling the weight in their hearts. Trump nodded, smiling gently. Then don't let today become something you'll regret tomorrow. If you're thinking of someone right now, if you're remembering someone you never got to thank, call them as soon as you leave this room. Don't wait until it's too late. The entire hall rose to their feet, erupting in applause. This wasn't applause for a politician. It was applause for a man who had just spoken the truth we're all afraid to face. The hall gradually fell silent after the extended applause. Many people wiped away tears, while others immediately pulled out their phones, searching for numbers they never thought they'd call today. But right now, everyone understood one thing. It's never too late until it really is. And now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever lost someone before you could say thank you? Is there someone in your life you want to call right now but still hesitate? If you could turn back time, what would you say to them? Share your story in the comments below. Today, your story might help someone realize they still have time to cherish their loved ones. If you're thinking of someone right now, call them. Tell them how much you appreciate them. And if this story touches your heart, share it with friends and family, people who might need to hear this message too. We can't turn back time, but we can change what happens right now. Thank you for watching this story. If you found this message meaningful, don't forget to hit that like button so this video can reach more people. And if you want to continue hearing soul-touching stories and meaningful life lessons, subscribe to our channel today. You never know how one small story today might transform your life or someone else's around you.